Welcome, my friend, to another gentle journey into the past. Tonight, we will drift together through the quiet streets of ancient Athens and explore the hidden, fragile world of those whose lives were rarely spoken of, the male concubines of Greece. Their existence was both gilded and shadowed, wrapped in silk and silence, their steps echoing faintly behind the marble columns of history. Before we begin, take a moment to settle yourself. Perhaps you are listening while lying down, perhaps with dim light, or maybe just the hum of your room around you. Let your shoulders relax. Let your breath fall into a calm rhythm. We are not in a hurry. History, like sleep, is best when unhurried. Imagine Athens in the evening, the agora now closing after a long day of trade, the smell of olives and fresh bread still lingering, the fading voices of philosophers debating under the colonnades. The sun has set behind the Acropolis, and oil lamps flicker on narrow streets. In the distance, you hear the quiet notes of a lyre drifting from a house where a symposium is beginning, a gathering of men, wine, and whispered stories. And behind the laughter, unseen and unheard, stand the concubines waiting, poised and silent. This was not the life of a free citizen, nor fully the life of a slave. It was something in between, a delicate and dangerous balance. Tonight, as you close your eyes and let the world outside fall away, we will walk with them. We will listen to their footsteps, glimpse their fears, and share their quiet moments of reflection. In the hours to come, we will wander through the origins of these young men, the places they came from, and the forces that bound them to this role. We will spend time within their daily routine, what it meant to wake in a stranger's house, to serve at feasts, to dress in fine robes that were not their own. We will look at the laws, or the lack of them, that left them so vulnerable. We will pause in myth with the story of Ganymede, the beautiful boy, stolen by Zeus, a story used to glorify what in reality was often harsh and painful. We will compare life in Athens, Sparta, and Thebes, where love, power, and war shaped men in very different ways. And finally, we will reflect on what it felt like inside, the loneliness, the small joys, and the silent fears that never reached the marble inscriptions of history. As I tell you these stories, I invite you to rest. You do not need to remember every name or detail. Let the rhythm of the words carry you. If you fall asleep, that is perfectly fine. History will wait for you, and the story will still be here tomorrow. Now take one more slow breath, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the bed or chair where you are. The world outside grows quieter. Together, we step back into time, into the lamplit streets of Athens, and toward a hidden doorway that few have dared to open. Tonight, we will open it gently, with compassion and with curiosity. This is the story of life as a male concubine in ancient Greece, and our journey begins now. The world of ancient Greece. Before we can follow the quiet footsteps of concubines through marble halls and lamplit rooms, we need to feel the shape of the world they moved through. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a jagged shore under a wide, salt-bright sky. Imagine mountains rising like the backs of sleeping animals, valleys cut by dry rivers, and fields of grain bending under a soft Aegean wind. This was ancient Greece, a patchwork of city-states scattered across peninsulas and islands, each with its own pride and habits, each fiercely independent, yet bound together by language, religion, and memory. Athens, where our story most often lingers, was not only a city of marble, but of noise. In the morning, the agora woke like a great throat, clearing vendors calling the price of figs, grapes, and anchovies, potters and bronzesmiths hammering delicate patterns. scholars gathering students with a nod. The stones of the colonnades kept yesterday's heat and gave it back to early walkers. Beneath the long shadows of the stoves, men bargained for fish and for favors, for barley and for power. Above them, high on the hill, the Parthenon gleamed in light, proclaiming devotion to Athena. You can hear the city in motion, sandals, scuffing cartwheels, clattering a flute, practicing a scale not quite sweet yet. Smells braid themselves in the warm air. Garlic, olive oil, tanned leather fish, pulled from the straits at dawn. If you listen more quietly, you might catch the soft splash of water in a courtyard basin, the whisper of linen as someone passes a doorway, the hush of a servant who knows how to be present without taking up space. This is the social craft of the household, the oikos, the frame within which family servants and sometimes strangers move together. Across the isthmus, Sparta was another universe, hard, spare, and trained like a blade. The Spartan boy left his mother's arms at 7 and entered a life of barracks, Hunger Games, and relentless practice. They prized endurance more than ornament, obedience more than argument. Their women held unusual authority in the household. Their men were often away on campaign, and their speech was famous for being short. Yet even there, human attachments formed the glue of courage. Elders mentored youths, and bonds of affection reinforced bonds of duty. The calendar wrote the city's moods. In spring, the great Dionysia flooded Athens with theater. Citizens sat shoulder to shoulder from dawn, weeping and laughing, as masks spoke truths the assembly could not bear to say. Comedies mocked the powerful. Tragedies dared to imagine kings who unraveled, and gods who looked away. In late summer, the Panathenaea wound through the streets with woven offerings for Athena music, ringing off stone girls and boys stepping carefully in white garments. On such days, the city itself seemed to float in ritual. Greek religion, if you tilt your head toward, it looks both intimate and immense. Gods were not distant principles, but presences with preferences. Athena for craft and clarity, Dionysus for ecstasy, and release Aphrodite for desire's tide, Hermes for luck and clever passage. Shrines tucked into street corners and thresholds. Small sacrifices salted the day. A person might pour a libation before a journey, tie a ribbon in thanks, or ask a god to turn a master's temper from storm to drizzle. Myth spoke in stories that blurred human and divine, reminding listeners that desire and fear touched both. Economy shaped the private world as strictly as any myth. Wealth was measured in land, in workshops, in ships that could bring grain from the Black Sea or wood from Macedon. A household big enough to host frequent symposiums often had many hands at work, cooks stirring stews thick with barley, stable boys currying horses, until they shone women weaving cloth that would pass through many fingers before it touched a guest's skin. In such houses, beauty became a kind of currency traded at tables where opinion, desire, and politics mixed like wine and water. Let us pause and sip a slower breath. You do not have to sort the terms and titles. Let them fold into the background like street sounds through a window. What matters is the texture, cities pressing together like islands in a shallow sea. Households with inner courts, fig trees leaving their sweetness in the air. Festivals that turned citizens into choruses. And at the edge of the lamplight, those who made comfort happen for others. You might ask yourself gently, in a world that praised freedom, who carried the weight of silence. Education also cast its long shade. Boys of citizen families might memorize Homer, learning the cadence of hexameters like a heartbeat. They debated with tutors, wrestled in gymnasia, and learned to stand naked to the sun without shame. To be formed was to be fitted mind and body groomed for a public life of speech and war. Girls learned differently, indoors, domestic arts, the management of stores and slaves. Many children never saw tutors at all. Poverty teaches its own curriculum. Into these uneven rooms of opportunity, future roles were written quietly long before anyone realized. As day leans toward evening, the city changes key. In courtyards, slaves sweep dust into small storms. In kitchens, pots breathe aromatic clouds. A steward calculates what wine remains and which jars can be opened without insult to the host's pride. Lamps are trimmed. Couches are rearranged. A flute player warms the reeds between his palms. The door curtain moves, and guests arrive with the day's arguments still in their voices. They recline shoes off robes, loosened, eager to prove themselves clever in talk. In these rooms words sparkled and stung, and servants poured wine to keep tongues supple. Let us step back out together into the cool night air of Athens. The city is never silent. It is stitched with footsteps and distant singing. The Acropolis stands dark immense, as if it were a cloud that forgot to move. Dogs bark, then go quiet. A woman washes a bowl in a doorway and tilts it to the stars. Somewhere, a watchman taps his staff against stone, slow and regular as a clock. In this breathing darkness, a young man might look up and wonder how many rooms are kept full of light by people who do not own the night. Beyond Athens, ships stitched the Greek world together. Sailors knew the moods of capes and currents the way shepherds knew the temper of hills. Triremes could outpace storms if handled well, their banks of oars biting water like teeth. Merchants gambled fortunes on weather and rumors. Colonies sent back timber metals, resins. Poets and teachers traveled the same routes, their fame moving faster than they did. With goods came strangers, and with strangers came stories. A household that hosted visitors yielded its rhythms to the presence of new voices, new questions, new risks. Law carried its own weather. In Athens, courts thrummed with suits and countersuits. Reputation was coin that could be spent or stolen. Citizens guarded their standing, and standing depended on public performance as much as private virtue. Some crimes were named, others merely nodded at. It tells you something that so many household arrangements relied on unwritten understandings, expectations enforced by gossip, by habit, by who was invited and who was not. For someone whose position was never fully recognized, law could be both shield and sword, and often neither. There were seasons of war and seasons of work. Fields were sown, ships were fitted, armor was checked, wine was racked. Boys became men in the space between festivals almost without noticing. Women aged in the rooms where oil lamps smoked the ceiling. And all the while, the city practiced being itself, repeating and revising the stories it told about virtue, honor, pleasure, and shame. Artists pushed at the edge of what marble could say. Philosophers pushed at the edge of what words could hold. Under these pressures, society revealed both brilliance and fracture. If you are still awake with me, notice how your breath has found its own cadence. You are listening at the pace that the city once moved, quick in the market, slow in the courtyard, careful at the threshold. This is the pace we will keep. We will not hurry the difficult parts, and we will not shy away from the quiet joys. Either the comfort of a clean linen tunic, the sweetness of a pomegranate broken open, the sudden relief when someone's anger passes by without catching. You. These are small things, but they matter, and they survive in memory long after marble crumbles. So the stage is set, a city that loved the sound of its own ideas, a world of sea roads and stone of festivals and lawsuits of temples where smoke braided the sky and houses where the floor kept secrets. Into this world walked The concubines, sometimes cherished, sometimes scolded, always observed, rarely acknowledged. In the next part of our journey, we will follow them more closely, learning how a boy might become such a figure, what choices were offered, and what choices were taken away. For now, let us rest here with the hum of Athens around us and carry this world softly in our imagination as we move forward. Origins of the concubine. If you are comfortable, let your breath deepen a little as we begin the second part of our journey. The world of Greece is alive around us, and now we turn our attention to the question of beginnings. How does a boy born into one of these lands come to stand silent in a stranger's house dressed in robes, not his own? The answer is woven from poverty, war, and desire forces as old as humanity itself. The concubine's story often began with loss. Sometimes it was the loss of a battle. Greek armies fought not only Persians or Macedonians, but also each other, city against city, ally against former ally. Prisoners of war were taken, and among them were young men, chosen not for their strength, but for their beauty. Captives who should have become laborers in the fields or rowers at the oars might instead be noticed by a wealthy citizen. A face, a posture, a youthful glow, these could decide a life's path. At other times, the road began in poverty. Imagine a poor household, a farmer with more children than land debts pressing at the door. A father or master might sell a boy into service, perhaps believing it kinder than watching him starve. Some families convinced themselves that in the house of a rich man the boy might at least be fed, clothed, perhaps even educated. Yet the bargain was one of desperation, and the boy's future no longer belonged to him. There were also markets, slave markets, that bustled beneath the same sun as the stalls of figs and pottery. Imagine walking through such a place. Chains clink voices, call prices, and buyers appraise bodies as if they were amphorae of wine. Among the rows stand children and youths, uncertain their eyes, darting to measure which stranger might soon be master. If you listen quietly, you might almost hear the heartbeat of fear beneath the noise. Pause with me here. Let us look more closely not at the crowd, but at one boy. He is perhaps 12 or 13, his hair still uncombed from the journey, his tunic worn thin at the knees, his lips pressed together as if holding back words he knows no one will listen to. He searches the market for a familiar face, but all he sees are strangers. One man touches his chin, turning his head side to side like an object. The boy's eyes flicker with panic before he learns to still them to look at the ground instead. If you breathe slowly with him, you may feel the flutter of his chest, each breath shallow and uncertain. When the purchase is made, there is no ceremony. A coin passes, a hand grips his arm, and he is led away. The crowd swallows the moment. Life continues. For the boy, however, a door is closed. He glances back one last time at the sunlit square, the dust rising from feet, the smell of bread from a baker's stall. It is the last view of freedom he will ever remember clearly. Now picture the walk to his new household. The streets grow narrower, the walls higher. He counts the paving stones without realizing, as if memorizing them might give him control. Each step takes him further from all he has known. When he reaches the house, the door opens inward and the world changes. Inside it is dim, cool, and hushed. The sounds of the street fade as the heavy wood closes behind him. He stands still, letting his eyes adjust, but his heart is not yet slowed. What does he notice first? Perhaps the smell not of earth and hay, but of oil, perfume, polished wood. Perhaps the fabric robes, finer than anything he has touched, brush against his arm as someone passes. He feels the weight of eyes upon him, some curious, some assessing, some indifferent. He lowers his gaze. A hand rests briefly on his shoulder, guiding him further inside. The boy's skin shivers where it was touched, not from cold, but from the unknown. That night, he does not sleep easily. The bed is softer than he has ever known, but softness does not comfort him. He lies awake, listening to every sound, the creak of beams, the distant laughter from the hall, the faint drip of water in a basin. He clutches the edge of the blanket as if it might anchor him. In his mind, he sees again the marketplace, the moment when his life was decided without his voice. He does not yet have a word for what he has become. He only knows he is no longer himself. If you are listening now, take a slow breath in and let it out gently. Imagine being in that room with him. Imagine the strangeness of a space that is warm, rich, and safe, and yet feels like a cage. Perhaps you too have felt that mixture comfort pressed against fear, security threaded with sorrow. The boy feels it with every heartbeat. Over the days that follow, he begins to learn the new rhythms of his life. He is dressed in finer clothes, his hair combed, his face washed with oils that sting his skin. At the table, he is told to pour wine gracefully, to smile, without speaking, to stand where he can be seen but not heard. Each instruction presses upon him, reshaping him slowly. He notices how quickly praise can turn to correction, and how correction can harden into anger. He learns to read the shifting moods of those around him, the way a sailor reads the sea. Yet beneath all these lessons is the quiet current of his emotions. There are moments when he longs simply to run, to feel the dust of the road beneath his feet. He remembers the sound of goats bleating in his village, the smell of smoke from his mother's hearth. He remembers laughter that was unguarded. In the household of his master, even laughter feels rehearsed. He learns to keep his memories hidden, for they are the last fragments of himself. Sometimes mythology provided a mask for these lives. The story of Ganymede, the beautiful Trojan boy carried to Olympus by Zeus, was repeated as if it were a justification. Statues showed him smiling, pouring wine for the gods, as though service were an honor. But the boy in his new chamber does not feel honored. He feels taken. And though he does not say it aloud, the weight of that truth presses into his silence. Let us slow down together for a moment. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Picture the boy lying awake, the lamp guttering low shadows shifting on the wall. His eyes stay open long after the rest of the house has gone quiet. He listens to the silence, and in that silence he feels the shape of his own loneliness. This is how a concubine is made, not in a single act, but in the slow layering of fear, obedience, and loss. Over time, he learns to move with a kind of grace. He discovers that if he anticipates a command, he can avoid the sting of rebuke. He finds that a careful smile can soften anger. He begins to perform the role expected of him, though inside the boy he once was, lingers small and trembling. When he catches sight of himself in a polished bronze vessel, he hardly recognizes the reflection. The clothes, the posture, the stillness, these are not his own yet. They are now inseparable from him. As we near the close of this part, imagine once more the street outside the marketplace, the world that goes on indifferent. To them, he is forgotten. To the household, he is a possession. But to himself, in the quiet recess of his heart, he is still the boy who once dreamed beneath a different sky. That memory will remain with him, fragile and hidden even as everything else is reshaped. This is how the story begins, not with love freely chosen, but with origins written by poverty, by war, and by power. In the next part of our journey, we will follow the concubine more closely into the rooms where he lived, and into the rhythm of a day in his life. For now, let your breath fall gently and let the image of the boy rest in your mind as the night deepens around him. A day in the life. Let us continue gently. If you are lying down, allow yourself to sink more deeply into the surface beneath you. The third part of our journey takes us into the rhythm of a day in the life of a concubine. A day that begins with quiet awakening and ends with silence, but in between holds hours that are heavy with the gaze of others. The morning is soft. The boy wakes before the sun fully rises, stirred not by choice, but by routine. A servant draws back the curtain of the room and pale light pools across the floor. He dresses in robes that are not his own choosing, robes chosen to please another's eye. As he runs his fingers over the fabric, he feels the strangeness of its smoothness. Once he wore rough wool, now he feels silk, and the contrast unsettles him. His body looks the same, but he no longer feels like himself. The household begins to hum. In kitchens, bread bakes and olives are pressed. In courtyards, other servants sweep away dust. The concubine's role is different. He is groomed, prepared, and told where to stand. He may be asked to practice pouring wine into bronze cups, to repeat lines of poetry, or to listen quietly while a tutor teaches him the melody of a song. The lessons are not for his growth, but for another's display. His value is measured in how he can impress guests. By midday, preparations for the evening already begin. Carpets are rolled out couches, arranged vessels polished until they shine like small mirrors. The boy walks silently among them, carrying a jar of oil to scent the room. The aroma of myrrh, heavy and sweet, clings to his hands. It feels foreign, almost dizzying. He pauses to breathe, but the air never feels like his own. He is reminded constantly that he is here to serve an image of wealth. As evening falls, lamps are lit, and the symposium begins. Men arrive in flowing garments, their voices rich with laughter, their footsteps confident on marble floors. The concubine takes his place, standing at the edge of the room. His eyes are lowered, but his awareness sharpens. He can feel every look, every judgment. He pours wine, his hand steady, though his heart races. Each drop that splashes feels like a test he cannot afford to fail. Pause here with me. Imagine standing in that room yourself. The air is warm with wine and song. The lyre's strings hum gently. A flute adds its soft cry. Laughter bursts sharp and sudden, then fades into murmurs. And you, like the boy, stand, waiting invisible, until called visible only as ornament. How does your chest feel as you imagine it? Does it tighten? Let it soften again. Inhale slowly, exhale slowly. The boy must steady himself in the same way. There are moments when a guest might speak to him directly. Sometimes the words are kind, a compliment on his voice, or the grace of his hands. Sometimes they are careless, reducing him to a joke among friends. He learns to smile in either case to mask the sting. Inside he feels small, yet he knows that each reaction is watched, weighed, remembered. One wrong look could bring anger later. His silence becomes his only shield. Wine flows more freely as the night deepens. Conversations grow louder, laughter looser, gestures broader. The concubine pours again and again. The rhythm almost hypnotic. Tilt the jug. Watch the stream step back silently. The repetition numbs him, yet beneath it, his heart longs for escape. He imagines running into the night, the cool air on his face, the sound of sandals on stone. But he does not move. His feet remain planted, his smile faint. Sometimes he is asked to sing. His voice, thin with nerves, must carry a song learned earlier in the day. The room quiets for a moment as he begins. He feels every ear turned toward him, every eye weighing him. His throat tightens, but the melody comes. When he finishes, applause or laughter may follow. Either way, he bows his head, retreating into the background. He feels not pride, but exposure, as if a piece of himself has been taken and displayed. If you are awake with me now, take a breath. Imagine the taste of wine lingering on the air, the flicker of lamplight against polished bronze, the heavy scent of myrrh. Imagine the weight of being, always observed, always judged. Let the thought drift across your mind like a shadow, and then let it fade. This is how the boy learns to survive, by letting each moment pass through him, by not clinging to the sting or the praise. As the symposium reaches its height, the boy feels exhaustion settle into his bones. He continues to serve his smile, practiced his posture perfect, yet inside he is a storm of longing. He misses the simple sounds of his old life, the crackle of firewood, the call of a neighbor, the rustle of animals in a pen. The grand hall feels hollow compared to the warmth of those memories. Still, he holds them close silently, as if they were talismans. At last, the guests begin to leave. Their laughter lingers in the air, even as their footsteps fade. The boy clears vessels, gathers fabrics, wipes away, spills. His hands move automatically, but his mind drifts. He thinks of stars outside, hidden from him by the roof. He wonders if anyone he once knew is looking at the same sky. He whispers to himself in the silence words no one else will hear. They are not prayers, but fragments of memory. Finally, he is allowed to withdraw. He walks back to his chamber. The corridor's quiet now. The house exhales, settling into stillness. He removes the fine robes and folds them carefully, though they are not his. Lying down, he stares at the ceiling beams until his eyes blur. The softness of the bed no longer feels strange, but neither does it comfort him. He closes his eyes, listening to his own breath. The day is over, but tomorrow will be the same. Take one last slow breath with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel the rhythm of the boy's day settle in your chest, steady, weary, unspoken. This is the life of a concubine, a cycle of silence, of service, of inner storms hidden behind quiet smiles. And as sleep approaches, we leave him there resting, but not free, waiting for another day to begin. In the next part of our journey, we will step back from the daily rhythm and look more closely at the laws, the myths, and the fragile protections that shaped his existence. For now, let the house grow quiet in your mind, and let yourself drift as gently as the lamps burning low. There is a moment almost every night when the room tests him. A guest gestures too quickly, and the cup tilts. A ring catches on the lip of a crater. A drop of wine leaps free and stripes the carpet like a thin wound. The boy's breath stops. In the space of a heartbeat, he calculates cloth first, then water, then the smallest bow, the softest apology. If he moves too slowly, the host frowns. If he moves too fast, the guest laughs and calls him skittish. He learns the fragile line between being useful and being noticed. At the edge of the couches stands an older servant, a man with careful eyes, who has survived many seasons of feasts. When the room allows it, he passes the boy a folded cloth, a whisper of advice, not now wait for the punchline, they want to laugh before they want to drink. The kindness is brief, a pebble placed in the boy's palm and then forgotten, but it warms him more than the lamps. He stores each small kindness like a seed for a garden he may never plant. Sometimes a guest asks him a question. Where are you from? Do you sing as well as you pour? How old are you? The questions are simple, but they are not innocent. They are hooks cast into shallow water. He answers with care, keeping his voice low, his words plain. When a guest presses, "What did you do before this?" he feels the floor tilt beneath him. He knows that truth is not what is being asked for. The performance of innocence is the true request, and he gives it because there is no safe alternative. The music changes the air. When the lyre softens, conversation grows sharp. When the flute runs quick, guests forget to be cruel. The boy learns to track the room by sound as a sailor reads wind on water. He times his steps to melody, avoiding a sudden silence the way a walker avoids a loose stone. If you are listening with him, notice your own breath, finding a rhythm. Inhale until your ribs open gently. Exhale and let your shoulders unclench. Quietly, you are learning the room too. When he sings, the song begins in the belly where fear also lives. He shapes each note like a cup. In the quiet that follows, let the house dim in your imagination and your breath grow easy. When you are ready, we will step onward together. Myths and sacred justifications. Settle yourself once more. If your eyes are heavy, let them half close. If your breath has hurried, let it slow. In this part of our journey, we step away from the daily rooms of the symposium and into the shining halls of story. For the world of the concubine was shaped not only by laws that ignored him, but also by myths that glorified what was in truth a taking. To understand how his role was seen, we must listen to the voices of poets and sculptors, to the gods they called upon, and to the shadows. In Greek imagination, desire itself had a divine face. Eros, the winged boy, was painted on vases with bow and arrow. Aphrodite, rising from the sea foam, embodied the pull of beauty. Dionysus, with ivy and wine, stood for abandon and ecstasy. These gods invoked at feasts lent an aura of sacredness to what unfolded in private rooms. If the gods themselves loved boys, if Olympus itself drank from a youth's hand, then surely the argument went, there was precedent, even blessing. Let us imagine standing before a marble statue. The room is dim, a shaft of light falls upon the stone. Before you stands Ganymede carved with the delicate features of eternal youth. His robe clings as if caught by wind, his lips curve in a soft, unreadable smile. At his side, an eagle spreads its wings, talons poised to lift him skyward. The sculptor has frozen the moment of abduction and made it beautiful. Yet as we look, we may ask quietly, what did Ganymede feel? Was the smile his own or the sculptor? Pause here and breathe. Imagine running your hand lightly across the cool marble, tracing the lines of a story told for centuries. The stone does not tremble, but in your own body you may feel unease. Myth gives beauty to what reality gave as fear. The boy in the master's house, lying awake under the low flicker of a lamp, knew nothing of divine favor. He knew only that he had been taken. The statue tells one truth, his heart another. Poets sang verses of beloved youths compared to roses and dawns. Philosophers debated whether love between men was the highest form of admiration. In their words, desire was a ladder to virtue, a spark that led the soul toward wisdom. Yet beneath the lofty speech was silence about the concubine. He was not the chosen partner of a philosopher. He was not free to love or refuse. His body might be dressed in silk, his hair perfumed, his presence praised, but none of this was his choice. The myths erase the D. If you are listening closely, take one gentle breath in and let it go. You are hearing the distance between story and life, between marble and flesh. That distance is wide. But for those who held power, myth was a bridge. It allowed them to believe their taking was noble, that their desire was in harmony with the gods. For the boy, it was another weight to carry the knowledge that even the heavens had been used against him. Sometimes he was even named with myth. A host might call a concubine my Ganymede, as though the boy should feel honored. The name turned him into symbol, into story, into an echo of marble that did not feel pain. Imagine being addressed not as yourself, but as a figure from legend, as if your own name were too small to matter. The concubine lowered his eyes and bore the title, but in the quiet of his thoughts, he whispered his true name, holding on to it like a coal kept alive under ash. There is power in images. Vases painted with banquets often show youths pouring wine, their faces idealized, their bodies graceful. To the modern eye, they are art. To the concubine, they were mirrors held up against him, showing not who he was, but who others wanted him to be. If you look carefully at such pottery, you may see how the youth never meets the viewer's gaze. He is always turned slightly, always offering, never demanding. That pose became expectation repeated in clay, in song, in marble, until... Imagine again the boy in his room after the feast. The echoes of laughter still cling to the walls. Perhaps he glances at a painted cup left behind. On it, a youth like himself smiles eternally as he pours wine. The boy touches the image with his finger, then pulls his hand away quickly. The picture is not him. It never was. But it follows him, reminding him that his story has already been told by others in shapes that deny his own sorrow. Breathe with me now. In through your nose hold and out through your mouth. Let the weight of myth rest on your chest, then let it pass. Myth can be heavy, but your breath is yours and it will carry you gently back to calm. The boy in our story did not always have such calm, but in remembering him, we can give him at last the dignity of silence filled with compassion. So, the concubine lived in the shadow of gods and heroes. Ganymede's sword, arrows shot arrows. Aphrodite rose from the sea, Dionysus poured wine. Their images filled pottery, temples, poems. To the powerful these images made taking seemed divine. To the boy they made protest impossible. Against marble and myth his voice was as fragile as a candle in the wind. As we close this part, picture once more the statue of Ganymede. Light rests on the stone. The eagle waits to lift him. The boy's face is calm, too calm. Step back from the pedestal with me. Hear your footsteps echo in the quiet hall. We leave the statue where it stands, but we carry with us the question it cannot answer: what was it truly like to be him? This is where we end for now. In the next part of our journey, we will compare how different cities, Athens, Sparta, Thebes, wove their own rules and expectations around such lives. For tonight, rest with the knowledge that myth can gild reality, but it cannot erase the heartbeat beneath it. Let your breath fall soft. The story will wait for you until we return. Let us wander further among the halls of art. Picture a painted kylix, a shallow drinking cup turned gently in lamplight. On its surface, tiny figures move in a circle. Men reclining cups raised a youth holding a jug at the center. The lines are simple, black against red clay, yet the message is clear. The boy is there to serve eternally caught in pigment. When the cup is lifted, wine hides his face. When it is drained, his service is revealed again. Imagine the boy of flesh and breath, seeing such an image, realizing that others have already decided what his role should look like. Sculptors, too, carried the story forward. In sanctuaries and private villas, statues of youths were placed as offerings. Their marble bodies stood polished and ageless, untouched by toil. To touch the cool stone was to feel an illusion of permanence, as though beauty could be frozen and kept. For the concubine who walked past such statues, the effect was piercing. He could see in the perfect curve of stone the expectation pressed upon his own skin. He could not keep agelessness. He could only carry its demand. In poetry, the distance grew wider. Pindar and others sang of youths whose beauty lifted men toward virtue, whose presence was likened to torches lighting a path to wisdom. But the concubine knew another truth. Beauty could also be a chain. Each compliment was a thread binding him tighter. Each metaphor was a mask laid across his face. The lofty verses soared like birds above him, while he remained grounded, his feet caught in the dust of daily obedience. Pause and breathe. In through your nose and let it out slowly. Consider the space between song and silence. The myth said he was chosen, he was beloved, he was divine. The silence said he was afraid he was owned, he was alone. Both stories lived together, but only one was carved in stone. As you breathe, let the weight of that silence rest, and then lift carried by your exhale. Even religion was not free from this weaving. At festivals, when choruses sang to Dionysus, wine flowed and laughter rang. In the midst of celebration, youth served as symbols of renewal, their voices high and clear in hymns. Desire and devotion were folded together until one could not tell where the god ended and the servant began. For the concubine, the blending was painful. His service was mistaken for sacred duty, his fear misread as reverence. He lived beneath the shadow of gods he had never chosen. Imagine again the statue of Ganymede. Light changes as the day moves. In morning it glows softly, in noon it blazes at dusk, it softens into melancholy. The stone boy never moves, never speaks. Yet the living boy, pouring wine in a crowded room, feels the story pressing upon him each time he lifts a jug. He wonders if even gods may take what they wish, who will protect me. The question is not carved, but it lingers unseen in the gallery of his heart. We might think of myth as distant. In this gentle silence, we leave him and prepare to turn the page toward laws and customs that waited outside the temple walls. Cities and customs. Let your shoulders loosen and your breath settle. In this part of our journey, we follow one boy across 3 cities, Athens, Sparta, and Thebes. And we stay close to the feelings that move inside him. Some concubines remained where they were first placed. Others were carried like luggage sold or gifted or simply brought along. Our boy traveled, and each city gave him a different sky, a different kind of silence to live inside. He reaches Athens first. The road deposits him into a city that sounds like a hive. The agora rings with bargaining and philosophy, with the slap of sandals and the scrape of cartwheels, with the sing-song of merchants calling figs and fish. He watches men greet each other with the warmth of long, custom palms, lifted eyes bright with argument. For a few early hours he allows himself a private fantasy. Perhaps here his service will feel gentler. Perhaps here people who love words will be careful with a person made of feeling. The fantasy holds until twilight. By evening, he stands in a lamplit room where couches face one another like boats that have been pulled ashore. The host's friends recline ankles, crossed tunics, loosened eyes lively. They speak of justice as if justice were a sweet to be passed around of virtue, as if it were a statue that could be polished. When they speak of love between men, their voices warm in a way the night does not. The boy stands at the edge with a jug that grows heavier each time he lifts it. When he pours, he measures not only the wine but the mood. Too quick is servility. Too slow is insolence. He learns the measure of Athens by the arc of a crimson stream. Pause a moment with him. Draw a slow breath. The aroma of myrrh is thick. Bronze vessels shine. The lyre hums a careful rhythm. Laughter occurs in bright flashes and then subsides like tide that does not wet his feet. As you breathe, notice how your ribs open and close. He does the same, but quietly, for to breathe audibly would be to appear. A guest asks where he learned to hold a jug without spilling. Another asks his age and does not wait for an answer. A third compliments the line of his jaw, as if the compliment were an act of benevolence. A fourth wonders aloud whether the gods notice small beauty as they notice the geometry of the heavens. Philosophy rides the room like a proud horse. The boy steps aside when it passes. He files away the lesson that in Athens, praise can be another kind of weight. Days pass, and the city becomes familiar. He knows where the sun strikes the courtyard tiles and where the cool air of night pools. He knows which guest wants a brimming cup and which prefers the wine thinned, who talks in circles and who cuts his words to the quick. He learns to smile when it is safe to smile. He learns to be nothing when being something would be counted as offense. He learns that the mind can be honored in public while bodies like his are arranged as decoration. In time, the road calls again. He is lifted out of Athens like a figure taken from a painted cup and set upon another table. The journey south to Sparta teaches him a different posture. Mountains narrow the sky. Pines sway and whisper to themselves. The air smells of resin and iron. Gone are the poems declaimed at supper. In their place are orders curtly given and more curtly obeyed. His new master wears habit like armor. Conversation is spare. The boy makes fewer mistakes because here mistakes are met as enemies, not as opportunities for wit. Sparta has little use for feasts of words. The evenings are plain. Men oil their bodies after drill and talk in short lines. The boy pours wine into simple cups and cleans the bowls with cold water and sand. He polishes bronze until it keeps the memory of the lamp with a dull gleam. He learns to move without drawing attention at all. In Athens, eyes burned him. In Sparta, eyes passed over him as if he did not exist. The feeling is not relief. It is erasure. He wonders which loneliness is heavier, the kind that is stared at or the kind that is ignored. Breathe once with him in this barracks. The fire is small. The benches smell of smoke. A helmet rests on the floor with a dent that someone will never quite hammer out. Notice how your breath can grow quiet without becoming tight. He tries to find that balance. He lets his inhale arrive easily, and he lets his exhale leave without protest. In that small practice, he discovers a private ground that no order can reach. Here he learns another lesson. Men speak of courage as if it were a stone they all carry, but he sees how much of it depends on the warmth of a hand on a shoulder or the nearness of a friend in formation. The talk of love here is not philosophical. It is practical. The bond that holds the line is praised. Yet the boy is not part of that bond. He belongs to the house, not the phalanx. His body is not a banner for bravery. It is a tool of comfort taken for granted, polished without thanks, put away without ceremony. In Sparta, he is not ornament. He is absence given tasks. The absence itself acquires a shape in him. Time passes, and the road bends again. North and slightly west to Thebes, a city that sings its legends with a full voice. He arrives to stories of founders and dragon's teeth and warriors sprung from earth. The streets carry music with less caution than Athens, and the houses do not tuck their pride behind courtyards as tightly as Sparta. He hears of a fighting force of pairs of lovers standing shield to shield of devotion, treated as a tactic and an honor. Something in him loosens at the thought that affection could be named aloud without mockery. He serves in a household where men train by day and gather by night to eat and to tell stories. The words fall differently here. There is laughter that makes space for softness. There are songs where a man's voice drops when he speaks his beloved's name as if the name were fragile or sacred. The boy listens from the margins and discovers a new kind of ache. It is not the ache of fear this time. It is the ache that comes when a door opens on a room where you will never be invited to sit. He fetches water for a pair of soldiers whose hands touch when they take the bowl. They do not flinch from the touch. They do not pretend it did not happen. Their ease is a light that reaches him, then does not. He feels warmed by it and left cold. He does not resent them. He resents the shape of the hierarchy that sits between all bodies and sorts them without mercy. In this place, love is strong, but only when it is mutual and free. His is neither. The gap is a wound you cannot see until it is named, and he has no permission to speak the name. Breathe with him now, in the Theban night. There are more lamps, more voices, more stories willing to carry tenderness a few steps without putting it down. As you inhale, imagine that tenderness reaching you. As you exhale, allow yourself to set it gently back where you found it. He practices the same careful handling. He takes what warmth is offered to the air and sets it beside his bed like a borrowed cup. Across these cities, he is called by different names. In Athens, he is the charming boy when a joke lands, the clumsy boy when a drop of wine stains a carpet. In Sparta, he is simply boy, a blunt syllable that does not ask or answer anything. In Thebes, someone calls him gentle, not with desire, but with the recognition of a temperament. He folds that word into his sleeve and later into his sleep. Words change shape between cities. They mark him and then wash off. None of them are the name he was born with. That name lives under his tongue like a seed he does not spit or swallow. He also learns the architecture of rooms. In Athens, the couches are arranged to face the performance of wit. In Sparta, benches face the fire with a purpose that tolerates no display. In Thebes, chairs and stools seem to reconfigure as people draw nearer to one another or angle apart. He studies the furniture as a map for how to move through a room without becoming a stumbling block or a provocation. Knowledge of furniture becomes knowledge of survival. He learns scents, too. Athens smells of perfume that seeks to refine the natural world. Sparta smells of effort and the river washed across tired skin. Thebes smells of cooking and resin and a sweetness that rises when a song carries over the threshold. Each smell writes a palimpsest across his senses. He becomes a library of rooms he did not choose. And yet there is kindness scattered through these places, small and careful. And in this soft ending, we keep only what we need. One breath, one clear image, one quiet step forward. When you are ready, we will turn the page together. Intimacy and secrets. The middle years of life do not rush forward with trumpet or drum. They arrive in silence, almost unseen, until one morning you wake and realize that you no longer look like a youth and not yet like an elder. The boyish softness has faded, but the sharp lines of old age have not yet settled. The mirror shows a face tempered by seasons, marked by lessons, and deepened by burdens carried quietly. For the Greek male attendant, whose journey we follow these years, were a twilight time balanced between past innocence and future weariness. They were years in which he learned to be both present and invisible, both human and shadow. They were years of intimacy and secrets. By now, he had traveled across Athens, Corinth, and other cities of the Greek world. He had poured wine at banquets, stood beside men who ruled assemblies, and walked through markets where marble temples stood like guardians of time. In his youth, he had been chosen, trained, and displayed. In his middle years, he became something else, a confidant, a listener, a vessel into which others poured what they dared not share elsewhere. Listening was his craft. He discovered that true listening meant more than ears could capture. He listened to pauses, to breaths, to silences that hung heavy before a confession. He listened to trembling hands on cups, to shifting eyes that sought safety in his presence. A magistrate might summon him after midnight and speak of debts hidden from the public. A poet might confess his terror of losing beauty as lines crept across his face. A wealthy merchant might lower his voice and admit that storms frightened him more than poverty. A general might strip away armor and show scars that spoke of victories the world celebrated, but his heart never forgot. In each case, the attendant offered no judgment. He gave no sermons, made no promises. He offered presence. He sat, he breathed, he nodded gently. He allowed others to place their stones in his chest. A single stone is light, 2 stones are bearable, but many stones together grow heavy, and with every passing season his posture bent inward, not from age, but from weight unseen. Take a breath with him now. Inhale softly, exhale slower. Imagine the stones pressing inside your chest. Imagine with each exhale setting 1 stone down. This is how he survived. Through small breaths, through steady rituals, through the discipline of letting go, even when letting go seemed impossible. He created habits to anchor himself. Before stepping into a chamber, he pressed his palm against the wooden frame. The cool grain reminded him of the world beyond secrets, the world of wood, stone, and air. When leaving, he touched the frame again as though returning what did not belong to him. These rituals were simple, but they held back the tide of other people's burdens. In the grand houses, intimacy moved like a shadow. It was always present, though rarely named. Some hands sought him out in gratitude, squeezing his shoulder with silent thanks. Others reached with possession, measuring him not as a man, but as a trophy. He longed for tenderness freely given, yet too often affection was braided with power. He learned to untangle the knots inside himself, to accept what was genuine, and let the rest drift away like wind through an open shutter. Eros, god of love, was there too, walking those corridors unseen. But Eros carried 2 lanterns. One lantern shone with warmth, the other with demand. Under one light he was cherished, under the other he was claimed. He came to know both. He came to know that love can soothe, but also consume. Still he gave mercies. He poured wine with steady hands when quarrels broke out. He adjusted shutters so that wind became music instead of draft. He carried children to their beds so carefully that their mothers, weary and worn, softened with relief. These acts did not enter poetry, but they were acts of love, quiet, practical, invisible to history, but powerful in their moment. During a harsh winter, famine gripped the city. Ships delayed grain, scarce voices sharp with hunger. Guests came with cold woven into their speech. He bore warmth where he could. He placed cups near trembling hands, stoked fires before complaints arose, laid blankets across shoulders before shivers became words. Slowly, the house began to mirror his calm. Without declaration, his silence became the season's refuge. Yet he was not flawless. Once he repeated a phrase he thought harmless, only to see it twist into a weapon when repeated by the wrong tongue. Once he trusted a promise never truly given, and disappointment carved itself into him. But he forgave himself, not with words, but with rhythm. By walking steadily, by opening doors gently, by holding silence faithfully, he learned that forgiveness is not a single act but a practice. Sometimes he climbed to the roof. The stars taught him patience. They reminded him that eternity stretches above, indifferent to whispered fears. They showed him that forgotten names are still written in constellations. He asked the stars not for escape, but for breadth, for enough space within himself to hold both sorrow and tenderness without breaking. There were seasons when the city shook not from war, but from fear of disease. Coughs echoed through narrow alleys, and rumors of plague traveled faster than the sickness itself. People shut their doors, yet fear slipped through the cracks. In those times, his role became more than ceremonial. He was summoned to sick rooms not with remedies, but with calm. He carried bowls of water, wrung out cloths to cool burning skin, sat quietly beside the restless. His own heart pounded with fear. He knew too well how fragile bodies could be, but he steadied his hands so that others might borrow his calm. Silence itself became medicine. Sometimes he hummed wordless songs, the kind his mother might have sung in forgotten days. Patients often drifted into uneasy sleep, not cured but comforted, held for a moment in the rhythm of another's breath. And in those dim rooms he discovered something new. Secrets were not always words. Sometimes a secret was simply the fear of being alone with suffering. He became the answer to that fear, not by healing, but by refusing to leave. In those nights, intimacy meant presence, not touch. Companionship, not speech. Take a breath with him now. Imagine sitting in a room where fever rages, yet for one moment you feel steady because someone will not leave your side. Inhale gently, exhale slower. Let yourself share that calm. When disease receded and life returned to the streets, the memory of those nights lingered in him. He had seen how fragile even the strongest could be. He had seen how silence could cradle someone closer than words. And he began to understand that his life was not only a matter of being seen, but of seeing. He became an observer, a collector of glimpses. A soldier laughing too loudly at a feast because he feared tomorrow. A wealthy man clutching his rings as though gold could anchor his soul. A woman who practiced her smile in polished bronze before entering a hall. Each detail was a fragment of truth. He carried them without judgment, as though gathering fallen leaves. Yet carrying truth like carrying secrets was heavy. There were nights when he whispered into the darkness confessions meant for no ears but his own. "I am tired," he said. "I am afraid. I wish someone would hold me." He did not expect answers. But in speaking aloud, he released the stones one by one. The silence received him, and in that acceptance he found strength. One evening, after a banquet had ended, he remained behind to extinguish lamps. He paused by a window, watching the moon lay silver across the courtyard. A thought stirred in him. What if he wrote his own story? What if he carved his truth on papyrus, as poets carved theirs? Into verse, he took up a stylus, pressed it to wax, and began. This is the life of one who was chosen not for glory, but for silence. Yet he stopped. He wiped the words away before they hardened. To write was to risk exposure, and his craft was secrecy. His story, he realized, was not meant for ink. It was meant for breath, for the quiet rhythm of steps in corridors, for the listening that turned silence into comfort. His story lived in the spaces between other people's words. Even so, he carried that longing with him, the wish that one day his truth might be known. Not celebrated, not adorned, simply acknowledged. For to be remembered is to live twice. Seasons turned. In the agora, he watched children chase one another between columns, laughing without care. He envied them their freedom, but he also cherished it. Their laughter was proof that the world continued, that innocence renewed itself, even when weighed down by secrets. He grew skilled at balancing two selves. To the world, he was composed, graceful, dependable. Inside, he was a man yearning for tenderness, struggling under the stones of confessions, learning each day how to breathe with weight pressing down. This dual life shaped him more than any banquet, more than any myth. One autumn, as leaves fell and winds grew sharp, he accompanied his master to a country villa. The air there was clear, the nights filled with owls and cicadas. Away from the city, he felt lighter. He walked along olive groves and thought of his childhood village of fields where he once ran barefoot. The memory struck him with both sweetness and sorrow, for he had become a man of shadows, yet within him still lived the boy who once chased fireflies. He paused under a tree and looked upward. Stars shone with the patience of eternity. He whispered, "Do you remember me?" He knew the stars had no memory, yet the act of asking gave him comfort. It reminded him that he too was part of the vast sky, that his life, though hidden, was not forgotten by the world itself. In these years, he discovered the quiet shape of love. Love was not dramatic embraces or verses sung aloud. Love was remembering how someone liked their bread, how they preferred their blanket folded. Love was lowering a lamp so a face was not scolded by harsh light. Love was letting the young remain young, not forcing them to carry the burdens of age. And love, he realized, was also in his own endurance. To rise each day, to breathe steadily in the face of fear, to listen without breaking, these were acts of love. They were not celebrated, but they mattered. So he continued night after night, day after day. He listened, he carried, he forgave. He forgave not only others, but himself. For mistakes, for disappointments, for longing, forgiveness became his companion. As the years deepened, he became both more visible and more invisible. In the houses of the wealthy, he was always present, yet rarely noticed. His steps were quiet, his voice softer than the lamp's hum. And yet when the shadows lengthened, when fear or sorrow pressed too heavily, people searched for him first. They trusted his steadiness more than their own strength. He began to see how entire houses were shaped not by the loudest voices, but by the quietest presence. His silence set the rhythm of nights. If he moved calmly, others calmed. If he stood steady, others steadied. He was like the weight at the center of a spinning wheel, unmoving, yet allowing all else to move. There was one evening in particular when he realized this truth. A storm lashed the city, and thunder rolled above marble roofs. Guests huddled together, laughter, brittle voices strained. He moved quietly from group to group, offering wine, adjusting lamps, speaking only when needed. Slowly, the room softened. The storm outside raged, but inside a gentleness grew. He understood then that his role was not simply to serve, but to anchor. He was the lamp in the corridor, the hand steadying the bowl, the breath that reminded others they could breathe too. But even anchors grow weary. At night, when he finally found solitude, he let his mask slip. He sighed deeply, shoulders sinking, face folding into lines of fatigue. Sometimes he wept quietly, not from pain alone, but from the release of having held too much. He cried not for himself alone, but for all the voices that had trusted him, for all the fears placed in his chest like stones. Still dawn always came, and with dawn new tasks, new whispers, new faces. He rose each morning, tied his cloak, and stepped once more into the corridors of others' lives. He accepted that his story was written in silence, that his monument was built not of marble but of moments that passed like breath. Take another breath with him now. Inhale softly. Exhale longer. Imagine standing at a window in the early dawn. The city sleeps. The horizon glows faintly. You hold in your chest the weight of many nights, but for one moment you feel light because you are not alone. You share your breath with the world. One morning, after long years of service, he stood on the threshold of a new day and realized how much had changed within him. The boy who once trembled at selection was gone. The youth who sought meaning in myths had faded. In his place stood a man tempered by secrets, strengthened by tenderness, worn by burdens, but still standing. He was not a hero of legend, not a poet, not a warrior. He was something quieter yet just as necessary, a keeper of intimacy, a guardian of silence. He thought often of Ganymede, the boy lifted to the heavens by Zeus. People said the myth was about beauty, about desire, about divine favor. But in his heart he saw it differently. Ganymede was a symbol of service, of carrying cups, of offering presents to gods themselves. And perhaps in a way he too was lifted not into the sky, but into the trust of those around him. His life, though hidden, touched the lives of many. One autumn evening, as the sun set crimson over the rooftops, he allowed himself a rare moment of hope. Standing by a courtyard where vines hung heavy with fruit, he whispered, "May the kindness I gave remain after I am gone." He knew no poet would write his name, no statue would bear his likeness. Yet he believed that the softness he had spread like seeds carried by the wind would take root somewhere in someone. This thought eased him, for what is a legacy if not the quiet shaping of lives unseen? He had shaped rooms, softened hearts, steadied hands. He had given the gift of calm in moments of fear, and that he realized was enough. The middle years did not end with ceremony. They simply gave way, like dusk giving way to night. He found himself walking more slowly, feeling weariness more deeply. But the habits of presence, the discipline of silence, the practice of mercy all remained. They carried him toward the later years of his life when age would claim his body but not erase the tenderness he had sown. When he lay down at night, he sometimes imagined a bowl on the table before him. Into it, he placed the fragments of the day, a harsh word he chose not to answer, a kindness he offered, a secret too heavy to keep in his chest. One by one, he placed them in the bowl. Then he whispered a blessing over it, as if to say, "Let these be held by the world, not by me alone." Only then did he allow sleep to take him. These were the middle years. These were the years of intimacy and secrets. They left no monuments, no written history, but they left something greater, a pattern of presence, a legacy of listening, a quiet love woven into the fabric of lives around him. And when dawn rose again, he stood once more ready to walk softly, to breathe, steadily to carry the stones and set them down again as only he could. Time, memory, and loss. Lie back once more and let the air move slowly in and out of your chest. We walk now into the long corridor of time. No road between cities, no symposium filled with laughter, only the steady unfolding of years. For the concubine, time was the one companion who never turned away, though it often walked with a heavy hand. At first, the boy did not notice its steps. The mornings looked the same, the lamps burned with the same light, but gradually his reflection changed. Cheeks once soft became hollowed hair, lost its sheen eyes, carried shadows that did not lift even after sleep. Others noticed more quickly than he did. Masters began to turn their praise toward younger faces. Guests who once beckoned him with a smile now passed over him. He learned that the decline of attention can wound as deeply as cruelty. Pause with me and breathe. Inhale, remembering something you once held dear. Exhale, acknowledging how even the most cherished things change. This rhythm is the rhythm he lived in, holding, losing, holding again in another form. In Athens, he felt the sting first. A new boy stood by the symposium door, wide-eyed, eager, unaware of how heavy the jug would grow in his arms. The older concubine stood behind, ready to correct small mistakes, invisible to most useful only in silence. He felt both pity and envy for what the boy would endure, envy for the shine of youth that still drew eyes. When the philosopher spoke of beauty as eternal, he lowered his gaze and pressed his lips together. He knew beauty was fleeting, he wore its ab. In Sparta, aging brought a different lesson. The barracks valued strength above softness. When his limbs slowed, when his breath shortened, the warriors did not mock him, they simply ignored him. That indifference was sharp. To be unseen when once every gesture had been scrutinized was a new kind of ache. He wondered which was worse, to be stared at until his skin burned, or to be unseen until he doubted he existed. In the still nights of Sparta, he found himself counting breaths like soldiers counted street. Thebes carried another story. Here, love was praised as a force for courage, yet his aging body was not celebrated. Younger lovers were honored in song. He listened from the shadows, his hands folded. Sometimes he allowed a memory to rise of the first time he heard such songs and thought perhaps tenderness could be his. Now he understood that songs rarely made room for servants. Yet in Thebes he also found small mercies. A soldier once touched his shoulder, not with desire, but with gratitude, thanking, "Hi." Take a breath with him in that moment. Inhale as if a kind hand rested briefly on your shoulder. Exhale as if you are letting the warmth linger before it fades. Such kindnesses did not erase years of silence, but they stitched small seams in a torn garment. He learned to treasure them. Old age brought him into a new fellowship, those who had served before him. He began to notice the bent backs of older servants, the way their steps slowed, the way their eyes carried distant horizons. Some had once been like him, brought into houses not by choice, but by the desire of others. They shared no open stories. Danger made them careful, but in glances, and in the exchange of a small loaf or a folded cloth, they recognized each other. In these moments, he felt less alone, bound by an invisible brother. Memory became his refuge. When work was done, he lay down and closed his eyes, returning to streams and fields, to the laughter of siblings, to the warmth of a fire he once sat beside. At times, memory felt solid, a stone he could rest against. At other times, it slipped away, faces blurred, voices thinned, leaving him aching for what he could no longer recall. Loss lived not only in the present, but also in the slow erosion of remembrance. Imagine now that you lie beside him. The lamp is dim. You close your eyes and try to remember a face from long ago. It appears, then fades, then returns in fragments. You breathe slowly, and in that breath you understand his sorrow and his strength. Memory both comforts and wounds, and still he clings to it, for it is his alone. As years turned, he saw the fates of others like him. Some were freed in wills, given a scrap of dignity at the edge of life. Some were sold again each time for less, until their worth was counted below rugs and bowls. Some vanished altogether, sent away without word. He carried these stories as shadows, knowing he might join them. The knowledge was heavy, but it also made each day precious. To wake and breathe was itself a victory. Yet time gave as much as it took. It gave him the ability to read a room with a single glance. It gave him compassion for the young who trembled as he once did. It gave him patience, the kind that waits without despair. It gave him the wisdom to know that survival, though quiet, is a form of defiance. Each day he lived was a refusal to vanish. Take a deep breath now. Let your ribs lift, hold gently, then release. Feel the persistence of your own life. That persistence was his story too. He was not celebrated in poetry or marble, but in each breath he drew, he proved that he remained. That truth was enough. He often wondered if anyone would remember him. Myths remembered gods, vases remembered ideals, statues remembered beauty. Who would remember the boy who became a man, who became an old man, whose life was spent in service? Perhaps no one. And yet, in his quiet hope, He imagined that somewhere in the far future, someone might think of him, might speak of boys like him, might breathe in rhythm with his story. That possibility, fragile as a candle flame, warmed him. As night gathered more tightly around him, he understood something profound. Time had taken youth, beauty, strength. Time had given weariness, scars, and silence. But it had also given him endurance, compassion, and the ability to carry memory as both burden and gift. He realized that he was more than what had been done to him. He was the witness of his own survival. As we close this part, picture him at twilight. His hair is gray, his hands rough, his eyes deep. Behind him lies Athens with its voices, Sparta with its silences, Thebes with its songs. Ahead lies only the open horizon of age. He breathes as you breathe now, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Breath ties him to himself, and in this telling, it ties him to you. In the next chapter, we will listen for echoes, what remains after bodies are gone, what drifts into history, what lingers in the silence of sleep. For tonight, rest with him in the company of memory, of breath of time. The night is long, but breath is steady, and it carries both him and you into rest. Before sleep fully gathers, hold one more image, the old concubine sitting by a doorway watching the stars appear one by one. Each star is a year, each year a breath. Some stars fade, others burn brighter, yet the sky remains. He lifts his face to it, feeling the cool night air, and he remembers that even in age, even in loss, the act of looking upward is its own quiet triumph. Echoes and legacies. Settle into the quiet now. Let your breath arrive without effort and leave without hurry. In this part, we do not follow the boy or the man he became. We listen for what remained after him, the faint tremor that a life leaves in rooms, in objects, and in other lives. These are echoes and legacies, not in bronze or marble, but in air and wood and memory. They are easy to miss unless we soften our attention and listen closely. The house continued. Couches were set out, as they had been set 100 times. Lamps were trimmed and lifted to their hooks. Floors were swept and polished until they reflected the wavering light. New hands learned how to hold a jug so that wine fell cleanly. New shoulders learned how to bear the weight of looking down. The gestures were the same, but one pair of hands was gone. What remained was a small vacancy like a chair at a table that no one mentions and that everyone avoids using without knowing why. Pause with me for a breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. As your chest expands and settles, imagine the air in that house, remembering him, even when people did not. Air is a quiet archivist. It keeps the shape of our breaths for a heartbeat before letting them go. In that brief, keeping lives a kind of record. In Athens, words endured. Philosophers filled porticos with arguments about love, beauty, temperance, and virtue. Their students copied those arguments on wax and papyrus. Voices echoed against stone and were remembered. None of those voices carried his name. A cup painted with a graceful youth pouring wine survived longer than the youth it purported to show. The paint could not record fear. The curve of a cheek in clay could not record a private thought or the way the boy steadied himself before entering a room. The vase became a monument to the idea of a servant rather than to a person who once had a pulse and a childhood and a favorite season of the year. Sparta preserved little beyond discipline. The cadence of marching continued with each generation. Armor was oiled, helmets were set in place, shields were battered and mended. The older concubine, who had learned to pass a cup into waiting hands without a splash, slipped from memory like dew. Yet even here a trace remained. A soldier might catch himself holding a cup more gently than before and not know why. A hand might pause above a bowl and remember the steadiness of another hand that once guided it. These were not memories anyone spoke aloud. They were gestures shaped by a life that had brushed against theirs and then moved away. Thebes held on to songs. Names of lovers were sung at festivals with pride and with longing. Their devotion was praised as strength. No chorus included the concubine who had stood near the door and learned every refrain by heart. Still once in a rare, while a man who remembered the care of a servant's touch found that his voice softened on a certain note, he did not say why. He could not say why. The softening itself was the echo. It was a tenderness that outlived explanation. This is how echoes live. They are not grand. They are not loud. They are the way a curtain moves when a door is opened elsewhere. They are the way dust lifts in a beam of afternoon light and makes visible the air you had forgotten to see. They are a rhythm suddenly missing in laughter and noticed only by someone who once relied on it. Breathe once more. Let your inhale gather the sense of a presence that has gone. Let your exhale acknowledge the spaces that remain. Objects kept him for a time. A cushion sagged in the shape of his sitting. A robe carried the faintest trace of oil on its collar. A wooden ladle shone more where a particular thumb had rested. None of these things were honored. They were simply used. Wear erased them. Washing erased them. But for a while the house held his outline in these small ways. You could learn an entire story from the hollow of a cushion if you allowed it to speak. People held him for a time as well. A fellow servant remembered the day he laughed without calculation. A musician recalled a night when the boy's voice found a true note, and the room went still not in praise but in recognition of something honest. A soldier remembered a cup set down so carefully that a quarrel did not become a fight. These memories were not official. They were not written. They lived as warmth in the chest and as a softening of the jaw when an old story moved across a face. Then they too thinned. Consider an empty symposium hall. The lamps have been taken down. The clay floors smell faintly of smoke and spilled wine. Your footsteps find their own echoes without trying. On a table you see a ring left by a cup. It does not matter whether the ring is his. It matters that someone once stood there and performed the same careful motions you are now imagining. The ring is a circle that cannot be signed. It is a shape left by living and then by leaving. Consider a Spartan yard at dusk. The earth keeps shallow footprints until the next morning wind smooths them away. The yard teaches a lesson about memory each night. It holds then. It releases. If you place your hand against the cool ground, you may feel the faintest thrum of steps that once crossed it. That thrum is not sound. It is attention turning into awareness. It is your noticing, and in your noticing the past tilts toward the present for a moment, and then straightens again. Consider Thebes after celebration. The last banner is lowered. Musicians coil their strings. The room that earlier swelled with voices is now a chamber you can cross without brushing against anyone. Sit where he once Saturday. Close your eyes. The air around you has no stories to tell in words, but it holds temperature and scent and the residue of movement. You become the ear that listens for him. You become the mouth that breathes for him. In the quiet, his echo borrows your body and is alive again for the length of a breath. If you are still with me, draw that breath now. Let it fill the space behind your ribs. Let it leave. Notice how the leaving does not mean loss. It means completion. Each breath does its work and goes. An echo is the same. It fulfills itself and fades. The fading is not failure. It is part of how echoes live. What does legacy mean for someone whom history did not plan to remember? For generals, it might be a carved relief. For philosophers, a scroll. For poets, a line that travels from voice to voice. For concubines, legacy may be a kind of hospitality extended to the future. It may be the way a person in another century sits more gently or listens more carefully. It may be the way someone pauses at a doorway because a boy once taught himself to pause before crossing any threshold. Legacy lives as practice more than as monument. There are harsher truths as well. Some houses did not keep even an echo. New masters cleared rooms, burned old linens, sold surviving servants elsewhere, and planted new vines in courtyards where older footsteps had worn lines in the dust. Erasure can be deliberate. Erasure can also be neglect. Both work by removing occasion for memory. The world is full of rooms that have forgotten who steadied them, and yet the world is also full of listeners. A visitor in a museum pauses before a painted cup and wonders who the real boy was behind its tidy image. A scholar skimming a court record lingers over a line that hints at a servant dismissed and imagines his night after dismissal. A singer reharmonizes a fragment of an old hymn, and without knowing why, shapes the phrase in a way that carries tenderness forward. None of these acts supplies a name. Each still matters. They prevent disappearance from being absolute. Before we move farther, let us give him one moment of shelter. Imagine opening a window in a quiet room so that the air turns and refreshes the space. Imagine placing a cup of cool water on a table and a folded cloth beside it. Imagine saying aloud that a life once moved here and that you will keep a little room in your attention for it. These gestures are small and private. They are also forms of remembrance. They allow an echo to visit without shame. You might also imagine the other boys, and men like him, those whose names did not survive. They were many. Some learned to sing. Some learned to read rooms. Some grew old and taught the young how to carry a jug without wrist pain and how to breathe in a way that steadies the hands. Some were released and some were not. They laughed sometimes. They stared at the ceiling at night. They loved and did not say it. When you take a long, slow breath, now you breathe with more than one life, the air. In this closing hush, let the image of the room remain, and let your breath lead you softly into sleep. Endings. Rest more deeply now. The night has grown long, and our journey has carried us through many rooms, many years, many breaths. We have walked with the boy, with the man, and with the echoes that followed. Now we arrive at the final place, the ending. This is not a place of fear. It is not a cliff or a fall. It is a soft bed, a quiet chamber, a dimming of the lamp. The ending is rest. The house where he lived has gone still. The voices that once commanded him are gone. The hands that once reached for him are dust. The walls remain, but even they lean toward silence. In that silence, he lies down. His body is weary. His breath slows. He has carried years of service, years of waiting, years of longing. All of it softens now like cloth folding into itself. He does not resist. He releases. Pause with me. Inhale gently. Hold the breath for a moment, then let it go. Notice how natural it is to release. That is the shape of endings. They do not need to be forced. They arrive like sleep when the body grows tired enough. They arrive like night when the sun no longer holds the sky. For him, the final night was like many others. The lamp burned low. The sounds of the city drifted faint through shuttered windows. He closed his eyes and saw not walls but fields. He smelled not smoke but water. He heard not commands but laughter once shared. Memory gathered softly, not as ache, but as comfort. It wrapped around him like a blanket. And in that wrapping he found ease. No one marked the hour when his breath ended. No one recorded his name in a scroll. But the air knew. The room knew. The bed beneath him knew. These companions do not speak, but they remember. They kept the weight of his last breath and gave it back to the night. Imagine now that you are there. The lamp flickers. The room is quiet. You sit nearby, not as master, not as servant, simply as witness. You hear the last breath, gentle, no louder than the rustle of a sheet, and then there is only silence. It is not frightening. It is soft. It is complete. You stay with it, breathing your own breath and rhythm, carrying his with yours for a little longer. Death and sleep share a likeness. Both close the eyes. Both release the body. Both open a door to silence. The difference is that we return from sleep. But tonight, as we tell his story, we allow death to feel less like erasure and more like endless rest. For him, after years of being owned, commanded, and replaced, rest was a gift. Sleep became the shape of his freedom. Breathe slowly now. In, hold out. Feel how the air supports you without asking. Feel how your body accepts rest without question. This is the lesson of endings, that surrender is not defeat, it is release. His story does not need grand conclusion. It does not need resolution carved in stone. What it needs is gentleness. What it deserves is the soft acknowledgement that he lived, that he breathed, that he now rests. And as you listen, you rest with him. His night and your night become one. Imagine the final lamp going out. Darkness gathers, but it is not empty. It is full of quiet, full of calm, full of release. You lie down beside him in that darkness. You let go of the day. You let go of the weight you carried. You let yourself drift as he did. Breath slows, thoughts quiet, body softens. You are safe in this ending. And so the story closes not with a cry, but with a sigh, not with a monument, but with a breath. The boy, the man, the echo they are, all gathered now into stillness. Their burden is finished. Their rest is complete. Your rest is beginning. As you move toward sleep, carry with you the truth that every life deserves gentleness at its close. Carry with you the comfort that you have remembered, someone forgotten. Carry with you the ease of knowing that breath itself is enough. Let your body sink. Let your eyes close. Let night cradle you as it cradled him. The journey is done. The lamp is out. Breath slows. Silence deepens. Rest now with him in the ending that is also peace. Our journey together has reached its end. We have walked through silence and song, through memory and loss, through echoes that lingered in rooms, and through the soft release of endings. Now we rest in the quiet after the story, where nothing more is asked of you but to breathe. You have listened with patience. You have carried a forgotten life with your attention, even if only for a little while. In doing so, you have given him a place in the present, and you have allowed his story to find gentleness where once there was only silence. That is enough. That is more than enough. Breathe with me once more. In through the nose, slow and steady. Hold gently. Out through the mouth, long and calm. Each breath carries you further into rest. Each breath carries the story deeper into memory. You and he share this rhythm now, and in that sharing there is peace. If you wish to return again, you may. The stories remain waiting like quiet rooms that open their doors when you are ready. There will be more nights, more histories told in whispers, more chances to walk among echoes and to find stillness in the past. Gentle Historian will be here when you return, ready to guide you into calm once more. But for tonight, there is nothing more to do. No roads to travel, no voices to hear, no burdens to carry. The lamp is out, the house is still, the breath is slow. Allow yourself to drift as he drifted into the ease of rest. You are safe. You are held. You are home. Stay a little longer in this stillness. Picture the stars above countless and calm, keeping watch while the earth sleeps. Picture the sea at night, its waves folding and unfolding with steady patience. Picture the branches of an old tree swaying gently in the dark, their roots deep and unmoving. These images are the lullabies of the world sung without words, carrying you into deeper rest. The boy heard them once in dreams, and now you hear them too. In their rhythm, there is no demand, only welcome. You are invited to let go of thought. You are invited to let your breath be your only companion, in and out like the tide, in and out like the cradle rocking, in and out like the endless night that asks nothing but that you rest. The ending is not heavy when you allow it to be gentle. It is not frightening when you allow it to be soft. It is simply the closing of eyes, the loosening of hands, the deep surrender into safety. Now imagine yourself beneath a wide sky. Stars stretch endlessly, cool and bright. A breeze moves over fields and touches your face. The world holds you the way a mother holds a child. You are safe, you are still, you are resting. This is how the boy's final night felt. This is how your night can feel too. You are held. Picture the sea again, waves rolling without hurry. They come, they go, they come again. Breath is like this. Life is like this. The ending is simply the moment when we join the tide instead of resisting it. The tide does not end. It carries us gently, endlessly. Let yourself float now. Let the tide bear you. Picture a village quiet in the dark. Windows are shuttered. Fires are out. Dogs sleep in courtyards. Children in their beds. The whole world rests. You are part of that resting. The concubine is part of it too. His last night joins all nights. His rest joins all rest. Nothing is lost. Everything is gathered into the same dark, the same breath. As you lie here, feel the weight of the day dissolve. Imagine it sliding from your shoulders and sinking into the earth. Feel the cool air around you as a blanket wrapping you in quiet. There is nothing left to chase. There is nothing left to prove. The night accepts you exactly as you are. The story accepts you exactly as you are. You can let go now. Perhaps tomorrow you will rise with clearer eyes. Perhaps you will remember fragments of what you heard. Or perhaps it will fade like a dream upon waking. Either way, it will have done its work. It will have given you rest. That is what matters. So rest. Rest deeply. Rest kindly. Rest without fear. The story has ended, but your sleep has only just begun. Drift now gently into the dark that is not empty but full of comfort. Drift as though the world itself were breathing with you, steady and calm. Good night, dear listener. Sleep well.